Hi, again, Professor Amy Keely. This topic of this short video is to explain my grading. So all of your professors in the School of Business have up to 14 days to grade your papers and your assessments from the point that they were due. The reason for that is many, but one in particular is that we're teaching sometimes up to 5 classes. And those classes may not be large like in universities, but it's still sometimes 30 or more students. So to grade all of those papers and have them all done, it does take us sometimes a little bit longer to grade. You'll see that in my course policies that I have up to 14 days to grade papers. You can ask me questions during that time. But I would ask that you be patient as I go through the grades, in particular because I give a lot of feedback. I will also tell you right out the bat, I am an English major from the University of Michigan, and I don't get into the politics of the schools. And I am a diehard Wolverine, but I also live down south into SEC territory and ACC territory. And so I came back with the perspective that the Big Ten is not that bad. They are fierce down there. And I do appreciate rivalry, but not where it gets vicious. So you'll never see me participate that. I always believe that, it's good to be involved in whatever school you identify with, and to respect other people in other schools for where they're at and what they value about their schools. So I just share that because, it is, you'll hear me talk about different things and about my education and my experiences as I share them with you. But I also grade for English because I'm an English major. So I expect proper grammar. Why is that important? Proper grammar is important, especially in emails, but also in the papers that you're writing, because you have to understand that there are different communication methods and different ways to communicate. And so if you're in the communication program here at the school, or if you're also going online and looking for information about communication, you have to communicate with people in the way they want to be communicated with, not the way that you want to be communicated with. There's a happy medium that you have to establish. But if your client wants an email, then you send emails. If your client wants a text, then you send a text. But there's also something that I've seen in my classes so far is formal language and formal speaking to someone and informal. And what I've noticed a lot is students coming out of K through 12 that have developed informal relationships with their teachers, with their classmates, with administrators. Yet in my college classes, what I'm training you for is how to communicate in the business world. And in the business world, if you act too casual with either people that you don't know or people in positions of authority, it can harm your career. It can cost you sales. It can cost you client relationships. So you have to be very, very careful about how you communicate. So I prefer being called Professor Keely. It is a position of authority. So I want you to treat me as if I am your boss in the business world. And if I develop a relationship with you and I say that you can call me Amy, then feel free to call me Amy, but it's at my permission to do that. And that experience that I'm training you is how you communicate in the business world. You call people by Mr. So-and-so, Miss So-and-so, until you get to know them well enough that they say, hey, just call me Dan or whatever. Now, you may have certain types of relationships where you know that they like casual relationships, but that's because you've done the research on them. You don't go in and just immediately start calling people and talking to them casually. The second thing, besides formal and informal address, there is formal and informal styles of language. So in my class, I'm expecting professional language. That means I don't want to hear in your papers that you say, well, these things are this, or these things are that. Find a different word. You've got a whole host of either business or marketing terms as you are learning. So these metrics are this way. These elements are this way. These pieces of information are this way. I don't want to see the word things. I don't want to see the word a lot. That's a very informal term. So you might want to say, instead of saying there are a lot of marketing elements out there in the world, you could say there are many marketing elements in the world. There are a significant amount of marketing elements in the world. You hear how I've just shifted my language from being casual and informal to professional. So when you're writing your papers, I'm expecting that level of change in your language to me, because I'm preparing you to write case studies, to write white papers, to put language in a PowerPoint presentation, to develop sales proposals, to do an analysis or a critique on something, to write blogs, to write content. And in the business world, you are going to have to make those decisions, because if you're in, let's say, marketing and you're targeting a certain group, let's say they are 50 and older, they're going to be offended sometimes if you use language that's too informal. On the other hand, the younger generation, of which you are, you're going to appreciate maybe a more informal approach. And so you're going to have to make those decisions. So now is the time to start thinking about that. So the papers that you write to me are as if I am your boss and I am expecting a professional, formal language from you when you are looking at these questions and how you answer them. It's going to be important. So I'm grading for grammar. I also grade for APA. So I'm going to go into that in another video, but I want you to understand that there's a difference between MLA and APA, and I have provided you with some tools to be able to say what the differences are. So that will be in a video too. And then also I grade for course content. So I'm going to want to see the terms that you're learning. I want to have you answer questions in terms of who, what, where, when, why. Answer all of those questions in your response to me. Who does it affect? How does it affect them? When does it affect them? Where does it affect them? So I don't want to see, and I'll talk about this later too, 3-4 short sentences response. You have to give me and communicate with me with enough, like a paragraph or two, with enough information that shows me that you know what you have learned in the text and the readings and the assessments for that particular chapter. And you can't do that in a couple of lines. I want you to explore the question and look to the textbook and find information in there that helps support your information that you're providing to me. I'm also going to be expecting that in your papers, of which you have a certain number of them in this course, I'm also going to expect that you have one outside source from a peer-reviewed journal or a highly reputable magazine like a Fortune magazine, Bloomberg, something like that, because I want to teach you how to be able to source, and we'll talk about that in APA. But the reason why you do that is because of plagiarism, and I'm going to talk about that in depth, but it's such an important thing to me, because you do not ever use any images, any ideas, any sentences, any paragraphs, any quotes, nothing that is not your own. And you have to start to think about that differently. Because if you go read a website where you're getting your information, let's say about Apple, you have to cite that. You didn't write it. You didn't get that information. So wherever you learned that information that you didn't have previously, you have to cite it because it's somebody else's data. It's either coming from Apple itself, or it's coming from somebody who's reviewing Apple, somebody who's doing an analysis on the company. You have to give them credit, just as if when you're in the business world and you do something spectacular and you analyze something in somebody and you want people to borrow it, you always want to get credit for your work. So that's what I'm going to be looking for as well. And I will be using a checker on your papers to make sure that you are using your own language, and that if you are using other people's language, that you are following the APA formatting. Now, I know you have probably learned MLA. And again, that's what I'm going to cover in a different video. So again, I want to start to highlight there's expectations in this course about how you use your communication and how you use that in your papers and in emails to me when you are addressing me. and asking me questions. So I'm always open to all questions. There are no dumb questions, but I'm kind of training you on how to be able to communicate with your peers in the business world, with your bosses in the business world, and with your clients in the business world, and even with your vendors in the business world. And it starts in this class. So I do have a higher expectation of you, but once you get to know me, then that relationship will change. So again, make sure that you are trying to get to know me, because that should be your goal, is to get me to flip to where I know you've built a rapport with me, and I change the way I engage with you from boss to maybe a little bit more informal. So that's the first step, is to understanding communication.